want to learn, okay, how to take that segmentation report and look at it day by day against the STAR report, which is probably the most powerful way to look at things. And then how do we incorporate, reports from Amadeus, right? Demand 360, Agency 360. How do we incorporate those reports? So I like to start with that. Your other question, how do you manage at scale when you're talking portfolio, a company of over 300 million, and maybe somebody wants to take some PTO, which, I encourage? It's communication, it's trust, it's setting the guardrails, it's knowing the market. And let's talk about knowing the market. Yes, we've got revenue managers that are great at what they do, but I tell every GM, it's still your hotel. You know that market better than anybody. You know that customer better than anyone. And with that customer, you also know the price elasticity maybe better than anybody. You know when someone's coming in for a walk-in, what can you really get, especially on those days of high demand. And that's important. It's powerful information, because as much as I could pull charts and statistics and all these fancy things, the human element that GM is going to bring back is also important, because to your point earlier, guest service and guest expectations, they're higher than ever. People are paying more than they ever have. So what's the price perceived value, right? And how do we incorporate that into what we do? It's very important. It's something that I don't think revenue managers are doing. We could do better at, right? Because yes, we talk a little bit about operations, but we don't necessarily not everyone's tracking that correlation between guest service scores. Hilton's doing a great job at doing it, and I know others are following, but the value for price paid is a big one. But back to managing it at scale, our GMs, we encourage our GMs to look at their rates for the day of and the next 3 days against their top 2 competitors. And if you see something, say something, because that's the only way we can move the needle. We are privileged by having some great revenue management tools through our brand partners, with some automation, which again is only as good as the revenue management team putting in those guardrails, right? Those floors and ceilings, so that we could optimize. And then it's hard work. It's not easy. Despite technology, the revenue manager still needs to go in, and when somebody's off, I have the privilege of watching over that hotel when they're off, and we encourage everybody to shut their phones and enjoy their time.
Yeah, definitely. I love this conversation, but also I wanted to hear from you if you have any mentors that you want to give a shout out, and why this person was, important in your career.
I have a number of people who I owe a great deal to. Gary Eisenberg is one of them. Early on in my career, and I learned a lot from him, but one of the best sayings that he always had, he would say 85% of the outcome comes in the first 15% of the plan, right? So take your time, plan it right, and the outcome is going to be well. I started off in food and beverage. I mentioned earlier, I worked for a great executive chef, Dan Dorothy, who, even in revenue management, I am still able to take some of the things that I learned from Dan, from food cost, beverage cost, and the rigor that we put into things in the culinary departments, and how we optimize and apply that throughout my career. There's a lot of other people. I'm sure that they know who they are, and I'm grateful to them all.
And if you could also think about, for the next generation of hospitality professionals, right? I had a pleasure the other day to speak with a class, and it's just like, how are people interested in joining our industry and the reasons behind, right? But then what do you think or suggest, as an inspiration for those folks, just, coming out of college?
So at Johnson and Wales University, I had the privilege of meeting one of the executive chefs um, at the White House, and I asked him a very similar question, and he said, "Do 1 year in the front of the house, do 1 year as a baker, do 1 year in regular culinary, 1 year in the different aspects of where the specialties were, and if you take that principle." Some call it job hopping. Others may call it trying to earn your stripes in the different departments so that you could be that GM. Because I think that the best general managers are the ones that are able to say, I've ran that housekeeping department. I've ran that culinary departments. I know what the reservations department looks like, right? And once you do that, you could then become the real coach of the hotel and move your way up and do so successfully.
Wow, absolutely. I'm gonna do a party start here. Because actually, I have a secret. I never said that out loud, but I've worked in different departments, but I never had the desire to be a GM. I'm like, I've always wanted to be in the sales department. And then, when COVID came and everything changed, I was employed throughout the pandemic. And I was lucky to be able to have the resilience brought back to where I started, because as a Brazilian first generation immigrant in the US, I didn't start in sales right off the bat, right? I was a housekeeper. I worked, as a dishwasher in Vermont, from all places. Um, and once you have the knowledge also of passing through and knowing how hard it is to really get your hands dirty, you know that you can relate to most GMs because they all have been through the same, experiences similar than yours. But Jason, I wanted to thank you so much for this time. It's been
Thank you.
wonderful talking to you and learning further. Any final words to our listeners?